Today, we are diving into the really stark economic warnings from investor Peter Schiff. He's convinced that a massive crisis isn't just a possibility, it's basically inevitable. And he's got a very specific playbook for how you and I can navigate it. It all kicks off with this really provocative idea that the money sitting in your bank account, the cash you've worked so hard for, is actually designed to lose its value over time. That it's being eaten away by a hidden tax that most people don't even see. So why on earth does he believe this? And maybe more importantly, what's his survival guide for the crisis he's so sure is on the horizon? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down in this explainer. We'll get into why he thinks the system is broken, and then we'll walk through his step-by-step guide to protect yourself. Now, to really get your head around Schiff's predictions for the future, he argues that we first have to go back in time. We have to look at a single promise that he believes was broken, a promise that set the stage for pretty much everything that's happening today. So this didn't happen overnight. It kind of started back in 1933, when the government basically forced Americans to turn in their gold. Then, after World War II, the US dollar became the world's money. But, and this is key, it was backed by that gold. But the real turning point, the big one, was 1971. That's when President Nixon cut the dollar's final tie to gold, calling it a temporary move that, has now lasted for over half a century. And this slide, man, it just lays it all out. You've got two totally different economic worlds. Under a gold standard, a government can't just spend whatever it wants. It's limited by the actual gold it has in its vaults. It forces discipline. But today, under the Fiat standard, money is just paper, or even just numbers on a screen that can be created out of thin air. It completely removes the brakes on government spending. And you can see where this is going, right? This ability to just create money out of nothing? Well, that leads us directly to Peter Schiff's core argument about inflation. He claims it's not at all what we've been told it is, and that it actually works as a kind of stealth tax on every single one of us. Okay, so here's where Schiff really flips the script on us. When we think of inflation, we think of prices going up at the store, right? But he argues that's just the symptom. The real disease, the actual inflation, is the government expanding the money supply. Or to put it simply, it's the money printing itself. So why do they do it? Well, think about it. Raising taxes is a political nightmare. No politician wants to do that. So to pay for all their spending, what's the easier path? They just print more money. But every new dollar they create makes the dollars you've already saved worth a little bit less. That loss of your buying power, that is the tax. It's just hidden. And this is where the rubber really meets the road. I mean, look at these numbers. The government comes out and says, inflation was 4.9%. But then you go to the grocery store. Egg prices up over 21%. Pet food, nearly 15%. Bread, over 12%. The gap between that official number and what people are actually experiencing is just massive. And here's the kicker. According to Schiff, this huge gap, it's not some accident or miscalculation. He flat out argues that the official formula for inflation, the CPI, is intentionally designed to produce a lower number. He says it's a tool to make the economy look healthier than it really is, and to keep the public from getting too worried. All right, so if the government is printing endless amounts of money, and according to Schiff, hiding the true rate of inflation, where does this all end? Well, this brings us to his biggest and most dramatic prediction of all, the collapse of the US dollar as the world's go-to currency. Just look at the difference here. It's like night and day. Back in the 70s, the US was the world's biggest creditor. It was a manufacturing powerhouse, making things the world actually wanted to buy. The dollar had value because it was backed by gold and by all that productive power. Fast forward to today, the US is now the world's biggest debtor, and it pays for real goods from other countries, not by making things, but by simply printing more paper. And that gap is enormous. We're talking over $2 trillion every single year. That's $2 trillion worth of cars and phones and clothes that the US consumes but doesn't produce, all paid for with newly created money. Schiff's whole point is that this kind of deal can't last forever. Which, of course, brings us to the trillion-dollar question. What happens on the day the rest of the world finally says, you know what? We don't want to trade our very real cars and our very real oil for pieces of paper that you guys keep printing and that are losing value every single day. What happens then? And his answer is, it's pretty chilling. He points to places like Zimbabwe during their hyperinflation. Everybody there became a billionaire, but a single loaf of bread cost trillions of dollars. It's a stark reminder that the number of zeros you have in your bank account means absolutely nothing if the currency itself becomes worthless. Okay, I know, that was a lot of doom and gloom. So, is there a way out? Is there a solution? According to Schiff, yes. And this is his actual survival guide, his playbook for what he believes you absolutely need to do to protect yourself. First up, what not to do. He says holding cash in a savings account is a guaranteed loser. It's like holding a melting ice cube. He's famously not a fan of Bitcoin and crypto, calling them speculative assets with no real intrinsic value. And he sees these new government-controlled digital currencies as even worse than paper money, giving governments the power to track and even control every single purchase you make. So if you're avoiding all that, where do you put your wealth? For Schiff, it's all about real, tangible things. Gold and silver, which he just calls real money. Things that produce income, like rental properties, or owning a piece of a business that sells stuff people actually need, not just want. And finally, getting some of your money out of the US dollar altogether by investing in stable, foreign companies that pay dividends. One of the biggest questions he always gets is, okay, but what about Bitcoin? Isn't that like digital gold? And his answer is a hard no. He sees gold as a real physical thing with 5,000 years of history as a store of value. He sees Bitcoin, on the other hand, as just lines of code, a purely speculative gamble that relies on you being able to sell it to someone else for a higher price down the road. So when you boil it all down, his whole strategy is actually pretty simple. It's a 3-step game plan. Step 1, protect your savings, your purchasing power, by getting out of cash and into gold. Step 2, be patient. Just wait for the market downturn he's sure is coming. And then, step 3, when everyone else is panicking and selling everything off, you use your preserved wealth, your gold, to buy up those valuable, income-producing assets when they're on sale. And really, at the end of the day, everything we've just talked about comes down to this one simple question he poses. Is your wealth actually prepared for what he calls the end of fake money? His advice isn't about some get-rich-quick scheme. It's about a plan to avoid getting poor slowly, one printed dollar at a time.